How's everybody doing? I'm driving, bro. I was about to do a YouTube video. We're gonna talk about Jesus, baby, the Bible. I gotta bring you guys my Bible expertise because I really know a lot of stuff. It's really just a waste if I just keep it all to myself. So I gotta tell everybody else about it. But today, hopefully the reception is coming through nice and clear. Sometimes it does, sometimes it does not. For the most part, it's not bad. But today I want to talk about the temple of God, or the temple of Yahweh versus the real temple, which is you. Because as a Christian, we believe that the temple of God, we are the temple. Christians believe, and we teach, maybe many Christians aren't even aware of this, that God lives inside of you. That's where God lives, inside of us. A lot of Christians are actually not aware of this. They think God lives in the sky, or I don't know what they think. But God lives inside of us. Inside of you and me. God dwells within inside of us, in each and every one of us. Alright. But I want to talk about like the origin of this teaching. Well, the origin of this teaching is simple. Creation. God himself. I mean the origin of it. Ever since we existed, God inside of us. Alright, but let's talk about the origin of the temple of Yahweh, the temple of Jupiter, the temple of Zeus. It's all the same guy, really. I'm just going to put it to you in simple terms. Like the temple of Yahweh, the Israelite God, the Jewish God, the temple of Zeus, the God of the Greeks, and the temple of Jupiter. These were all, especially the top gods. I'm not talking about the lower gods. The top god, Jupiter. He's the top god. Alright, Jupiter, Zeus, Yahweh, Jehovah, the sky god, Baal in other districts. They might call him Baal. That is true. But this is the top god of the government. And the temples were all built by the government. Because back in the ancient world, there was no separation of church and state, guys. It was like religion just controlled stuff. I mean, even the Pharaoh would say that he was Horus in the flesh, right? Supposedly, allegedly. So, there was no separation of church and state. So, the temple of Yahweh, or the temple of Zeus, temple of Jupiter, what's the difference? These are all government-built temples and government-sanctioned religions. Like, it was paid for by taxpayer dollars. Alright, that's just facts. So, Jesus is anti-government, y'all, if you didn't know. He's anti-government. So, that's the real reason why we say that God lives inside of us and not inside of a temple. Because the people of the temple are a bunch of assholes, a bunch of control freaks. Alright, that's the government. That's the Illuminati. Literally, guys, like literally. That's for lack of a better term. They're not I'm the Illuminati, if we're going to be precise with our verbiages. Alright? But that was the government. Those are the control freaks. The tyrant. The evil tyrants ruled over the people at your local temple. Maybe certain cities had a chill temple. I don't know. Maybe every once in a while you got cool priests and chill. I'm sure that happens once in a blue moon. For the most part, we all know religion is for control. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that one out. So that's what all this stuff represents. Control. The Old Testament was written by priests and scribes on the orders of the government. Even Ptolemy, the king of Egypt, well, the Pharaoh, he's a Pharaoh and shit. Ptolemy is a pharaoh, baby. So is Cleopatra. They is pharaohs and shit. But even Ptolemy commissioned the writing of the Old Testament in the Greek language, according to legends. So that was put together on order, by government order. The government had ordered the Old Testament to be written, to be compiled, whatever, collected, stored, however you guys want to look at that thing. It's a collection of stories and writings. However you want to look at it. All I know is the Ptolemy had that thing ordered. The Pharaoh of Egypt, the king, the Basilius. He's the one who put out the order for the Old Testament to be put together. The government. The New Testament, no. New Testament is not written by the government. There's a big difference there, guys. A big old difference. Because Jesus was having run-ins with the law. The law of he went up in the temple and started whipping people. And notice Jesus was not in charge of the temple. All right, that was some Pharisees and the Levitical priests and all those guys. And he went up in there and started cracking them with a whip. He did not approve of their actions. So Jesus is pretty much anti-government. Well, I'm sure he'd be pro if it was a good government, if they was in there doing the right thing. Yeah, but it would make you sacrifice bulls and goats at the temple. All right, so Yahweh temple worship is no different than Greek temple worship and Zeus temple. Greek and Roman temple worship, excuse me. Yahweh temple worship is no different than Zeus and Jupiter temple worship. You have to sacrifice animals at the temple. You do a bunch of weird incantations. You got your ceremonial knife. And I'm sure they're different. They each, the Greeks and the Romans and the Jews all had their different quirks in the way they worshipped and the way they sacrificed. Look at the macro of it. It's the same freaking thing, guys. The temples are even built with similar dimensions. And there's a certain way you build a temple, if you guys didn't know. So it's all very similar. But that's why the New Testament teaches, and Jesus taught us, look, God, you don't need a temple. We're the temple. God lives inside of us. All right, now there's some people who would say that Christianity is an evolution of Judaism. And the reason why Christians started saying that we are the temple and that God lives inside of us is because the temple of Jerusalem was burned to the ground in 70 AD. And they'll say that's why the Christians stopped believing in a physical temple and went to the spiritual temple. But look, even in the book of Isaiah, it says God does not live in a house made with human hands. So that's not a new idea. I was just listening to History Valley video. He had James Tabor on there. James Tabor brought up a good point that in the Qumran community, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, they talked about how you do not need a temple, and that the Qumran community may have been anti-temple, which makes sense because they lived in seclusion. They were probably anti-government. They were like preppers. The Qumran community was the ancient prepper. They were doomsday preppers. That's what it kind of sounds like if it was real, if it's not all things. I consider all possibilities. Maybe the whole thing's a hoax. I don't know. But I mean, it sounds good. So even people in the Qumran community, they didn't believe that you needed a temple to worship God. So that's not a new idea. So no, Christianity did not evolve out of Judaism. And people try to say Christianity evolved from Judaism. They stopped believing in the physical temple because their original temple was burnt down by the Romans. But that's just not true. That's not saying you don't need a temple is not a new idea. So no. And why would that doctrine be so appealing to the pagans? Because pagans, they were converting to Christianity at a rapid pace, I would say. Some people would disagree at the pace in which they converted. But why did the teaching of the God temple, why was that teaching so appealing to the ears of a pagan? If the Christians, they say we don't need a temple because the temple of Jerusalem was burnt down. But why did that same teaching appeal to the pagans? Their temples didn't get burned down. Their temples was still there. They got converted into churches. Unless some whacked out Christian burned it down. You had a lot of whacked out Christians, guys. You'll have whacked out people in every group. Extremists. But how come pagans, they was vibing with the notion, yeah, God doesn't live in a temple. Fuck that temple. The matter of fact, the guys at the temple are a bunch of assholes and weirdos. He touched me in funny places. They've been molesting people at the temples. Molestation originated in the temple religions, in the in the temple system. That's where the whole molestation, child trafficking, it all started with the temple system, guys. He touched me at the temple. I don't want to listen to that weirdo at the temple no more. That weirdo at the temple, he already chopped his own balls off. I'm not listening to him. All right. So yeah, I could see why that doctrine of that God lives inside of us, we don't need a temple. Why? Because what the temple represents tyranny. It represents control. It represents slavery. It represents misery. All right. It represents corruption, greed and corruption. From that temple, from the temple system comes greed and corruption. You know, they make you sacrifice too many animals. They constantly want more. They constantly require more gold and silver from you. They constantly require more and more oblations and sacrifices. And it's just never enough. Because really, they don't really want your sacrifice. They just want your wealth. They're greedy. So that's what the temple system and the temple religions have to offer, is greed and corruption and molestation. So that's why Jesus, he came to save us from them freaks. And that's why Christians, we got rid of all them pagan temples and all those sacrifices. I don't know about you guys. I'm not into blood sacrifices. That's freaking weird. And I'm a vegetarian. I wonder if the old philosophers, they probably hated sacrificing, especially if they were a vegetarian. I wouldn't want to do it. I probably did it anyway back in my past life just to get along with everybody. You know, you don't want to rock the boat. That's why a lot of times, that's why you got to infiltrate a lot of these churches. All right? And you go in there, but you don't tell them everything you know. Because people's on a need-to-know basis. You know what I'm saying? So we got to bring these truths out to the whole world. Baby, that's my thoughts right there for today. My drive is almost complete. I have nearly reached my destination, but we have heathens blocking the road with their giant pickup truck full of junk because, you know, they're not very neighborly people and the road only belongs to them. So I had to take a detour and speak for about 20 seconds longer. Oh my God. That ruined my whole day having to take that detour, let me tell you guys. Like, I'm not mad at those people for blocking the road. That road does belong to them more than it belongs to me. You can have this world because this world is rubbish. You can have that road. You can have this world. You can have that temple. All you crazy, whacked out Christians talking about the third temple. You can have it. You can have it. I thought the temple wasn't made with human hands. That's what I thought. If anybody's at, where the temple? And that temple is already built.